Fellas, I think it's time we have a long, serious talk about kinetics. They have been power crept out of the game by ability builds and the verbs of subclass 3.0. And yeah, they're getting a little bit of a bump in the final shape by making Prismatic a little better by charging your light and dark meter for transcendence at the same time. That's big. But they need a little bit more than that for general play and not using Prismatic. They should be a little bit better, I believe, anyways. So this is mainly focused on legendary primary kinetic weapons. Special weapons, they have their place. They deal an extra 15% damage to unshielded targets, which is not a small bonus. Like, that's pretty good. But, it's hard to justify using a legendary primary kinetic weapon over a solar SMG or a solar hand cannon or any primary that matches your subclass. It's hard to justify using that primary kinetic weapon. So, my first pitch, let's make legendary primary ammo kinetic weapons deal an additional 10-15% damage against red bars and only red bars. It's a way nerf, not even half as good as the normal exotic primary buff, but I think it would help out kinetic primaries a little bit, be contenders within, the meta. I think it would really help them out. And on top of that, if you didn't see that short I posted a while back, it was like a week or two ago, about kinetics, I said, hey, why don't we just make all the kinetic mods cheaper? Still fully believe that. Do that. It's the Dollar General, the family dollar of damage types. And I think it should be that way. It fills a generalist role. It does everything worse, or it does everything cheaper. Well, maybe not everything, but it does the lower end stuff cheaper. But I'm not just talking general buffs to kinetic weapons as a whole. I'm talking specific roles, things that kinetics can do that other things just can't. Okay? Did you want a kinetic version of incandescent? I mean, we kind of had that with kinetic tremors. But anyways, I came up with a couple ideas for new perks and ways to rework some of the older perks to buff them up to more of the energy weapon level. Starting off, give kinetic tremors unstoppable. You're having to compete in the kinetic slot with stasis fusion rifles, which are so insanely good, specifically Riptide. It stuns overloads. It stuns unstops. If you're good enough, which you don't really have to be that good at it, it stuns barriers before they could put the barrier up. So kinetic tremors, if we give it unstoppable, has a way of stopping one of those three, but also, say, look, a hand cannon, specifically Midnight Coup, that thing takes 6 shots to proc kinetic tremors, which would be ridiculous if you're trying to use it to stun a champion. So let's give it a little buff. Precision damage reduces the amount of hits to proc. Huh? So say every second precision hit with a hand cannon reduces it by 1. So it's 1, 2, and now you need to hit 5 shots. You hit 2 more, and it triggers because it would reduce it down to 4. You already hit 4. That's what I'm thinking, The more times you hit accurately, the more likely it is to just proc kinetic tremors. Further enforcing you to deal precision hits, which will deal more damage on their own compared to body shots. But then also kinetic tremors, procs more often, making it more consistent, strong burst damage from your kinetic weapon. And also, let's have it trigger on precision kills, because on a primary, it's like, oh yeah, I can use kinetic tremors and just waylay into bosses, mages, champions, things like that. But it's bad against ads, which is what primaries are more for. So now, you headshot a thrall, and all the thralls around it get knocked back because of kinetic tremors, and they take damage from it, which would massively help it in the ad clear style department. Next up, I made this one up. I couldn't think of a name other than Smart Matter Tracers. They're overload rounds, basically. They stun overloads. Successive hits disorient targets. So have them reel a little bit, but it's like disorienting grenades with a shorter duration. Like, it's not quite as good as blind, but it's like, oh, you know, they have a harder time hitting. They get flinched, and their aim is bad for a little bit in PvE. PvP, it probably won't do a whole lot. It might give you some flinch. Final blows on combatants affected by debuffs increase your handling, range, and stability, whether that's disorient or a subclass term. If they have a debuff on them and you kill them, you get increased handling, range, and stability with smart matter tracers. It's like it's leeching it to further empower itself. You see what I'm thinking here? All right, catching my drift? And another brand new perk I made. You're gonna see a theme here. It gives anti-barrier. Yes, I made a kinetic perk, or reworked in the case of Kinetic Tremors. But I made 2 new kinetic only perks specifically to handle champions. These ones give anti-barrier, anti-matter jackets, breaking shields or destroying constructs, refills a portion of your magazine, and it can overflow it. So you're combining overflow perks like Envious Assassin overflow and subsistence. That's a banger. And also Genesis. But using your class ability makes this weapon deal more damage versus shields. So it's almost like adaptive munitions, but different. So like if you're a hunter, you see a shielded enemy, you dodge, or I guess a barrier enemy, you dodge, pull out your kinetic, and it's dealing more damage to that shield or barrier. And when you break that shield or barrier, you have more ammo, so you can just keep shooting. It's a banger, right? It would be somewhat useful. And that's all it needs to be, is somewhat useful. And I know I talked about adaptive munitions before already. I do have a rework in mind for that, specifically in kinetics. I'll get to that later, because I have one last unique kinetic perk that I thought of that I just want to include here. This one would be super rare, specifically only allowed in like high-end activities that feature the hive. So maybe you throw it in a refresh of Pit of Heresy, maybe Shattered Throne, but like, you know, King's Fall, if they bring back Crown of Sorrow, Crota, things like that. It is specifically high-end hive content. Only on kinetic weapons, reloading after a precision kill, so like Kill Clip, grants necrotic blooms on kill for a short duration. So basically it's it's like Volt Shot, really. So you have Volt Shot, but instead of jolting enemies, your bullets for a short duration, so let's go 3 seconds, are basically, you know, necrotic grip punches, or necrotic grip kills, or Osteoshriga kills. That way everyone can have the fun of necrotic grips. I mean, there's already exotics that do stuff like that, but it's more accessible. And I think every class should have an exotic that does necrotic grip stuff. I think necrotic grips should have been in the shared pool, I'm gonna be honest, of the prismatic exotic. I think everyone should have access to stuff like that, because it's super fun, super unique. Bungie, let everyone do that a little bit, please. And I think that's something that could extend to other factions for their raids and dungeons, like a Vex-related perk and stuff like that for the legendaries from that stuff. Whether it's only on kinetics or only on certain damage type or whatever, I think that stuff's cool. Because then it's like, either in your headcanon, your guardian specifically dislikes that group the most, or like they're the biggest threat, or like for warlocks, Osiris, he studied the Vex, Tolan studied the Hive, and they infused those technologies and magics into their own gear. Maybe you're doing the same. Stuff like that. I think that stuff's cool, and it's a thing in other RPGs. Let's do it more in Destiny and not just have it relegated to exotics. Let's get a little goofy with our legendaries and our raid loot and stuff like that. Anyways, the rest of this video is going to be talking about, you know, refreshing some old perks that aren't great. specifically on kinetic weapons. Starting off with Thresh. When is the last time anyone used Thresh? It's worse bad juju. Bad juju needs help. But give kinetics an extra little bump to how much super they give, and have it also give more transcendence energy, specifically on kinetic weapons. We don't know how Facet of Grace is going to work in game yet, but my vision for this is if you're using a Thresh weapon on a kinetic, or a Thresh kinetic weapon with Facet of Grace, which makes kinetics deal or give more transcendence energy, it would keep up with using one or the other, light or dark, or maybe more. You know, make it competitive in that space. You're just like pumping out transcendence energy like that. It's super quick. That's my vision of it. And then let's buff adaptive munitions, because the idea is that your bullets adapt to the shield. So on kinetics, let's have it apply a different debuff. It's like very much adapting to the situation, okay? It applies debuffs to nearby combatants when you break a shield, and it's based on the shield type. So like, you know the burst shields give whenever you break them with a matching damage type. It's that, but it applies debuffs. So on Void, it's going to apply volatile to nearby enemies. Use a kinetic weapon to break a solar, it's going to scorch enemies. Arc, it's going to jolt. Stasis will slow, and Strand will sever. I didn't want to apply Suspend because that'd get a little goofy. Maybe you could, but, you know, I feel like Sever is kind of underutilized, and also it would help you target prioritize a little bit more. I don't know, all the debuffs do, but I don't know. I feel like Sever works, and we don't see it enough, even though Slice just came out. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you know, I feel like Sever is a good option for that. This one is a 2-for-1. This is for Osmosis and Permeability. I can't think of any kinetic weapons that have Permeability. Osmosis, I could think of a ton. I know some people really like using Osmosis on kinetic weapons, but in my opinion, I don't know why I would use it. The only thing I would use it on is Traveler's Chosen. Outside of that, I can't really think of a reason. But give them a small buff, you know, 10%. It's all it needs to be 10%, maybe even 5%. That way, whenever it drops off the kinetic passive, it's not like you're just completely abandoning it. Because the only cases where it really matters to change the damage type a lot is if it's changing to Void, Strand, or coming up Solar. Because then it will apply Volatile, Unravel, or Scorch with Song of Flame. So like, if it's not one of those three, if it's Arc or Stasis, you're losing that damage, but you're not necessarily getting enough of a bump in applying debuffs to really counteract it, unless your build is perfectly meant to like have you use stasis weapons, which that is in the same slot. You might as well go ahead and use a stasis weapon, or Arc, which if you have one in the energy slot, like I just thinking of legendary Arc weapons, Posterity, I'm a big fan of. I know it's a 180 gross, but I really like it. There's the Ikelos SMG. Like there's options, you know? So give us a reason why we would want Osmosis. Oh, we're switching our damage type, but we're losing 10 to 15% of our damage. That's, in my opinion, that's kind of a tough deal to make when I could just, you know, use a weapon that matches my subclass to start with. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Those are some of my thoughts, some of my ideas to, you know, juice up Kinetic a little bit. I think it's a little lacking. Tell me what you think down below. Like, comment, subscribe, please. I really want to know your opinion on Kinetic and how to make it more competitive with matching your primary to your damage type. And yeah, all that goofy YouTube stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.